Welcome to Catalyst Conversations, the podcast where we spark powerful change in women's wealth. I'm Hadriana Leo, a wealth coach, counselor, and strategist, and each week we dive into the conversations, strategies, and stories that help women confidently create the life they've always dreamed of. So grab your favorite bevy, settle in, and let's get started on transforming your relationship with money. This is Catalyst Conversations, igniting change in women's wealth. Let's spark the conversation. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Catalyst Conversations. I am so excited to have Dr. Natasha Williams here as my guest. Dr. Natasha, welcome.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
You know what? We've had a few conversations before this, and I was bouncing in my chair when I was thinking about, oh my gosh, it's almost time. So I can't wait to dive in to all of the wonderful nuggets you have for us today. So as usual, I'm going to start with a saying or a motto or something that kind of resonates with you that's going to help our audience. And what you provided me with was this. And I'll just pause right here and say, this speaks to me on a visceral level. Okay, I've come a long way, my friend. I've come a long way. All right, here's the motto. You cannot operate from an empty cup. With an exclamation mark at the end, might I say. Make sure your cup is full first so that you can choose whom you want to pour into. What a powerful combination of words. Tell me what about this resonates with you?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think what's so important is that this also came from a journey. Because we hear a lot of these words and hear a lot of these phrases, and they may resonate at the time, but I think if we don't do the work ourselves, then we don't necessarily get the point of that saying. So even though I've heard this and I know this, and you study for years, understanding this stuff, a lot of times it's in your personal life or personal trials and tribulations where you really then have to look back and say, well, wait a minute. Am I practicing what I'm preaching? And B, what do I need to shift in my life in order to do so? And why was I going down that trajectory? So in saying that, I had to sit and reflect. And again, having the clinical knowledge is great. Being able to then sit and work it through yourself is another thing. To be able to sit and start to think about all of the factors that impacted my life to that particular point in time. And it came through adversity. So just mentioning a marriage that went south, infidelity, infertility, separation, divorce, you name it, thinking you have everything, but absolutely you did not.
Right.
But in that space, I had to go back and think, what influenced my thinking patterns in order for me to believe that this is what the archetype of a Black woman was supposed to be.
Right.
So taking those deep dives were integral, because then I had to go back to look at upbringing. How was I socialized? Including ethnicity, culture, religion. All of these things had to come into play for me to now sit back and say, this is what has been poured into me in my over 40 years. And this is how I frame my belief in terms of who I think I need to be.
Right.
It is to my detriment. So something is amiss.
Yeah, there's a disconnect somewhere when what we're taught. In fact, we idolize the empty cup.
That's it.
Right?
And
it is lifted high as if this is the model of what we should be as women, as Black women. And then we're sick.
Right.
And then we have no energy. And then our hair starts falling off. We have psychosomatic issues all throughout our body. And then we ask ourselves, well, I'm doing all the things I should be doing. What's
Right.
wrong? Hence
Right.
the disconnect. So
Right.
you cannot operate from an empty cup, but so many of us have been conditioned to do exactly that.
Yes.
If we are empty cups, what exactly are we pouring out?
Fumes.
Yeah.
You know what, it's and I say that a little jokingly, but we have been conditioned to survive.
Yeah.
A lot of times we miss the point about we were created to thrive. And
Mm-hmm.
that to me is the difference. Now, mind you, we can go down a whole historical, road in terms of where this whole notion of Black women and the notion of survival comes from and how that has transcended over generations in terms of what we are taught now. But our Black womanhood, a lot of times, has been created through a sense of being a martyr. And
Yes.
being a martyr, being sacrificial to everybody else to uplift our womanhood. So we need to sacrifice for our husband or our partner. We need to sacrifice for our parents. We need to sacrifice for our children. All of our needs are seen as secondary, tertiary, or even
Mm-hmm.
beyond that. So
Right.
when that occurs, that's where the empty cup comes in because we've been taught that filling our own needs or fulfilling our own needs is selfish and is not the mark of a good woman. So
Yeah.
if we now, so the thing is that that's what has been taught, but that does not mean that it is absolute truth, and it doesn't mean that it's the norm. It's just what was taught to us.
Right. And that in itself was conditioned by the capitalist society in which we were brought up. But you know what? We better not go there because we're going to start going down quite a road. And that might be a whole other episode that I would actually like to explore
Absolutely.
the role of our society and capitalism and all of that and how we are conditioned.
Absolutely.
But I want us to spend some time really looking at, how we can correct or at
Mm,
least neutralize, eliminate, just pound out of our upcoming young women
yes.
that notion of that empty cup
Right.
syndrome. I really want to spend some time giving some solutions, at least for this conversation. So
Absolutely.
let's tell our listeners, our viewers, a little bit about you. I like to call you Dr. Natasha,
Yeah,
but
that's
she is
great.
Dr. Natasha Williams. And you've been at this for quite a while. As of the time of this recording, 19, almost 20 years as
That's
a
good.
clinical psychologist. And you've really dedicated your career to transformative change, especially focusing in on leadership and radical self care. So, tell us a little bit about what sparked that passion for you. That's a lot of years to give to one specific area and then deep diving.
Yes, yes. So thank you for that. It's definitely been a journey that came with its ups and downs. So yes, I've been a clinical psychologist now for just over 19 years. Had my practice where I was a solo practitioner and then partnered up with two other clinicians to create a clinic. So our clinic is still thriving. So still do a lot of my clinical work in and of itself, my diagnostic work, my psychotherapeutic work, supervision. I'm an adjunct professor as well. So I do those things. But the thing is that I also needed to ensure that I wasn't just separating my personal and professional in a sense of understanding that my personal is also going to inform my professional.
Right.
So going through some hardships, as I mentioned a little earlier, we won't dive into too much about it, but just talking about the whole notion of being married for just under 10 years, but going through 7 of those years of fertility treatments,
Yeah.
eventual infidelity as well, where, my now ex-husband, decided to have children with another woman.
Oh my
Um,
word.
all to do going as I was going through that fertility journey with like 6 rounds of IVF, IUI, all of these things. then going into a space of, all right, it's time for me to get out of here because I need to now understand that this is not the place God wants me at this time, and this is not where
Right.
his blessings are going to come to fruition. So
Right.
getting to the space of leaving that, but in understanding that entire journey, and I'm skipping over just a little bit, but
For
we can
sure.
definitely dive back in. But it was an understanding how I navigated that journey to say, you know what, we do not have to live in mediocrity. We don't have to continue to follow this script of what I had seen growing up in terms of Caribbean women just staying by and being miserable, still being in
Right.
these relationships. You can thrive. And you don't have to take mediocrity as the status quo. So when
Right.
I was able to really start to dive within myself to understand what I needed to start to change my frame of reference and also provide me with the strength to start over again.
Right.
In doing that, I almost, in a sense, turned that into a bit of a blueprint because I said, if I can do this, then
Yes.
then I have to teach other women, and that is going to be my legacy. So that's what I was created for, to ensure that what I have done, I can then navigate other women in particular to do as well. And it's not just about leaving a divorce or relationship, but it's to come
Yeah.
to the space of understanding that we are created for more than just what other people's perspectives are, right?
Yes. And what
So
other
also
people's stories have been,
exactly. And
we
what they
get to
try to
do it.
superimpose upon us as
Yes.
well. So we were all created unique as unique individuals. So in doing that, that's where I created this framework. So that's where it became another trajectory of my practice or my business. So I still have the clinic, I still do all of this stuff, but I said, you know what, there's other aspects of me and other parts of my business that I also want to impart to others. So that's where the radical self-care came about and its computations from a personal, professional, corporate perspective.
Yeah. You know what? Kudos to you. And I'm not saying that to make you feel like you're a superwoman or anything like that. But kudos to you for taking your pain and transforming it into something that helps others to blossom.
Hmm.
I can't imagine, I cannot imagine how horrible that period of your life must have been.
Hmm.
I mean, my goodness. Yet you took that and you transformed yourself first, healer, heal thyself.
Right, right.
Uh, And then you took the experience and you took what you knew from the clinical perspective, the theory of it. You actually converted that into practical actions that
Yes,
worked.
that's
And
it.
and then now you can share it with others who are going through similar, I'll call it grief, because
I like that.
I don't think it's, like you said, it's not just divorce or loss of a marriage. I think it's grief in all aspects of
Hmm.
our experiences. We need to grieve and release, and then we can go. But it took some courage. How did you muster up that courage?
The courage was a tough one. So that's where my motto a lot of times is I use a combination of clinical expertise, personal experience, and faith.
Yes.
So for me, faith was quite important to me. I've always been raised in a Christian household, so really having that relationship with Jesus Christ has been very important to me. But
Mhm.
I think what people need to understand is that your relationship with Jesus Christ or with God is going to be your own, first and foremost.
Yes.
Everyone is a unique being, so everyone has their own relationship with Jesus Christ.
Right.
So your relationship, as human relationships do, evolve. So even though I've been raised in the church and I had a very specific understanding of what I thought my relationship was, when you go through these trials and tribulations and how do I muster up the courage to to leave this relationship where everything, including my Christian mind at the time, is saying to
Yes.
stay. The
Yep.
Bible says, you shouldn't divorce, or so it's been interpreted.
Right.
So coming to now a space where I mustered up courage by isolating myself for a while,
Oh,
having a conversation with God,
right, right.
and really saying, because there's prayer, but prayer is a twofold thing. I can talk all I want, but if I do not, and I say this tongue in cheek, if I don't hush my mouth and let God respond,
That's right.
then I'm only doing a one-way interaction here.
That's a monologue.
That right, and it's not a conversation. So being able to sit back and sitting in my room literally on the floor in tears saying, my goodness, this is a relationship that I've poured and invested almost 10 years in, and I've known this person 10 years before that, so this is
Oh,
20
wow.
years of my life, for this kind of betrayal. What do I do with this? And the first thing that God reminded me of is this is not the first time that you had to start over. And look, you landed on your feet. So he reminds you of past situations, not
Mhm.
exactly the same, but
Right,
just reminds you that anytime that you were down, you leaned on me and I lifted you back up.
right,
So
right.
that was the first piece to start mustering up that strength and courage. And the second piece after that was God really telling me or saying to me, I never created you for this life of mediocrity that this man is
Yeah.
trying to shove down your throat.
Oh my
I
goodness. So
said,
powerful.
wow. I said, okay, Lord, what do I do next? And
Right.
then following that, I didn't see the whole picture,
Hmm.
but there's that saying from Martin Luther King, you don't have to see the whole staircase, just take a
The
step.
next step. That's
So
right.
for me, it was God, well, God, what is the next step? And literally, it was it was a Sunday. I told him that the marriage was done and I was leaving. By the following Sunday, I was gone.
Wow.
I packed up all of my stuff
Uh-huh.
and I moved into my parents' home, but I did that in a week because
Amazing.
I said, God, I go, that's what you're asking me for. Let's go. And that's the only thing I knew at the time. I knew that I couldn't stay where I was at.
Right.
I chose to leave the home,
Hmm.
right? Um, and then I said, okay, you know what? I'm moving in with my parents and we'll figure out the next steps after that. So I just took a step and then the next step was revealed to me after that. But that's where a lot of the courage um came from. And if I didn't sit with that, I think there's parts of me because I stayed in the relationship for an additional 2 months after he dropped his bombshell of, well, I have another woman pregnant. She's 3 months along. I needed
Oh
to
my
I needed to
goodness.
hedge my bets because you and I weren't having any kids. So I just needed to make sure.
Oh,
Um, and
the gall.
the gall, right? But I don't want us to get a divorce. I want us to actually stay married. You can help me raise the child. But
It's to take the, never mind. You know what?
yes.
Never mind.
Anyway, so yes, in the midst of all of that, I really had to sit and say, God really just told me, he's like, I didn't make you for this. And go to the part of scripture where, yes, I talk about divorce, but I talk about the means in which you have every legal and spiritual right to be released from this marriage.
Absolutely.
Adultery. Oh, it says it right there. Okay,
Check.
pick. And then I found out that he'd been cheating on me for years. So, the tick box was always there. And I think God was actually aiming to move me for quite some time. It took me a couple of head shakes to do so. But courage,
Yes.
the courage comes about where when you able to ground yourself in whatever faith that you are in. For me, it's a relationship with Jesus Christ, but then everything aligns after that because he shows you things that align with my clinical expertise, what I've been helping other women and other clients navigate,
Right.
and with other previous personal experiences. They all formulated together once I sat and decided to have a heart-to-heart conversation with God.
Yeah, I'm really appreciating that the foundation, the roots of your liberation, your evolution, your blossoming, and in self-care, it's scriptural, it's spiritual, it is in that core belief that no one can shake. It
Mhm.
exists outside of our humanness. And it is that rock solid foundation that no one can move. No better place to root ourselves,
Absolutely.
especially when things are getting crazy. So I imagine your idea of radical self-care is probably well different from what is mainstream. So when
That's
people
right.
talk about self-care, well, usually it's very cliche, but usually it's one aimed at women, and
Hmm.
two, it usually involves bubble baths, massages, and spas. But I can say from sitting here, none of these that I've just described are radical. So how would you define
Yes.
radical self-care?
Well, for me, radical self-care starts with a mind shift,
Mm-hmm.
right? If you do not shift your mind in terms of understanding who you are and where that template has come from, those behaviors that you had just mentioned, like the bubble baths, the manicures, pedicures, massages, while nice in terms of taking care of yourself, are seen as band-aids instead of actually dealing with root cause. So for
Right.
myself, radical self-care starts to talk about core beliefs, which is something that we talk about from a cognitive behavioral therapy perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Core beliefs are what we believe about ourselves, what we believe about others, what we believe about the world, and what we believe about the future, which has been formulated through our upbringing. So
Right.
once we understand that foundation, we now get to understand why we do the things we do, say the things we say, why we think it's possibly absolute truth. And in diving in that, we can now understand that a manicure, pedicure, massage is not just a behavior, it is my right to have those
Mm-hmm.
things, and I
Yes.
can do them unapologetically. I don't have to do them in a spirit of, I only have these 2 hours and I could only do them when I'm under duress or I'm under complete burnout. Radical self-care is a daily practice.
Yeah,
It's
it's not
daily.
something, it's not, what I'm hearing is radical self-care is not something that you have to earn. It
That's
is
right.
something that is your right. You don't have to
Absolutely.
qualify for it. You don't have to work to deserve it. Oh
That's
my goodness, this is
right.
so
That
powerful.
is it.
It
You've
is
hit the
your
nail on the
right.
head. You've hit the nail on the head.
Oh my goodness. And I guess to be honest, that is probably what's so radical about it. Because everywhere we listen, we're moving around in the spaces, everyone is saying that it's something that we earn. Like you don't get to rest until you work hard. You
That's
don't, it's
it.
like, no.
Exactly. I need to be like, I need to come back into my house bedraggled before I can actually say, you know what, I need to go for that spa day. No, absolutely not. I get a manicure because I feel like I want to get my nails done.
Yeah,
I go for a massage because I feel like I want to have somebody pamper me. It's not about earning your stripes or earning your keep. But again, it starts from a mindset because if you do not believe
yeah,
that you are deserving of that every single day, then unfortunately, those behaviors come from a place of duress. So you
yeah,
do those behaviors, you maybe are relaxed for like an hour or so, you come back into chaos, you also do them from a place of guilt. I'm
yeah,
feeling guilty taking away this time because my husband needs me, my partner needs me, my kids need me. So I don't have this time and I'm not deserving of it. So we really have to, but again, that comes when we start talking deeper layers. Where does that come from? It comes from a space of how we were raised, what information that was indoctrinated in us growing up in terms of
right.
our understanding of womanhood, of Black womanhood. I talk about the superwoman syndrome and where that comes from. Tear up the cape.
Yes, please rip
Tear
it
it
to
up,
shreds.
rip it to shreds, sew it back up if you want, but you don't necessarily have to put it back as a cape. I usually tell people sew it back up and wear it as a skirt. Do what you want to
Yes.
do with it.
Listen, I can make a nice little dance hula skirt with that cape, let me tell you, and watch me dance my life away. I'm
And
not a
it's
very good
yours.
dancer.
It's okay. But the thing is, it is yours and it's yours unapologetically and it's on your terms, right?
Yes, yes.
So that, and the other thing I also want to mention about radical self-care, which I think is a misnomer, is because when we're starting to talk about it from this place, a lot of people believe that now we're talking about being selfish. But selfish from a detrimental perspective.
Yes.
Selfish meaning I'm throwing you under the bus so that
Hmm.
I can then be elevate and shine. Where Jan Van Zant calls it as self-full, and that's where the pouring, making sure you pour into your cup, make sure a car can only run if you give it gas. It
Yes.
cannot run on fumes. So it's so important to say this is not about being selfish, not to the detriment of others, but it's understanding that my needs, my wants, and my priorities are just as important, maybe even more so than others as well. So I'm not saying throw my children out or anything like this, but literally it's about that my needs are also very important too. I don't
Yeah.
have to sacrifice them in order to appease everybody
Yeah.
else.
It doesn't have to be either or.
That's right.
I think if we all, and this works when everyone practices radical self-care, everyone actually benefits.
Thank you.
So it's not selfish. It is actually beneficial. So teaching my daughters to practice radical self-care means that when they need that time of quiet by themselves, they can say, Mom, not right now. I'm just gonna sit here for a bit. And I can accept that because
Mhm.
I have exemplified to them and said, I can't do this right now. I just need some quiet. I'm going to
Yes,
close the door. Do you
right.
understand? So that
Absolutely.
is acceptable. And when we all do it, we all benefit. So
Exactly.
here's one point, and we're going to touch on a few of those. And I want to really get them in because I think they are vital that we understand. NO period. Okay. And
Yes,
I've just spoken a complete sentence. Verb,
100%.
subject, object, all the punctuation required, everything. NO period. Tell me
That's right.
about that.
Yes, no is a complete sentence. It's
Yep.
an absolute complete sentence. I don't have to justify it. I don't need to have to explain it out because when you start explaining it out, you're taking responsibility for someone else's comfort.
Mm-hmm. Oh my, oh my,
My
oh my, oh my. Yes.
My boundaries are my boundaries, and they're very important to me as well. And if you respect me, you would understand my boundaries because I would have communicated them in a healthy relationship or in a healthy
Yes.
exchange. I would have communicated them to you, and you would have understood them. When you try to push my boundaries or try to believe that your comfort is more important than mine, then that's where the problems lie. So when I say no, no is about maintaining my boundaries. I may have set them already, but it's about the maintenance of boundaries. When you
Yes.
start to try to explain them out or, try to rationalize, justify, I'm saying no, but, or
Mm-hmm.
because of, no, 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 no. I've said no because I can't do it. I don't have the capacity to do it. And that's it.
Yeah.
And that's all. Usually what I will tell my clients is when you're setting and maintaining boundaries, you're aiming to put things on more of an equilibrium because a lot of times what happens is that individuals who have disrespected your boundaries have increased their comfort while your comfort has decreased. What we need to do is put that more into balance to understand that your needs are important. We need to get back to understanding that. And in doing so, what happens is that the other person who was benefiting from your lack of boundaries will start to feel uncomfortable.
Right. Right. And we're programmed to not cause discomfort to
That's right.
anyone.
That's right.
So how do we deal with the full knowledge that if I say no, or if I set this boundary, someone will be uncomfortable. How do we unravel that knot of
Yes.
tension or anxiety that inevitably it does happen?
Well, that's actually the first space that I work with my clients, and I actually had to also understand for myself that in setting your boundaries, there is bound to be conflict. So what you do
Mhm.
is you prepare your client or prepare an individual for that. If I now understand that for me to feel better, I need to understand what my boundaries are, set my boundaries, communicate my boundaries, and also understanding in the maintenance of them, these are the possibilities that can happen. People are
Mhm.
going to push back. Why? So then we start to understand and start to unravel the why. So where the knot comes in is we aim to understand why do we believe there's a pushback in those boundaries. Part
Mhm.
of it is going to be this person is no longer comfortable. They're not getting the benefit of you any longer in a certain
Right,
area. So we start there. Sometimes the unraveling of the knot is our own issues because
right,
in having those loose boundaries, it fulfilled a purpose within ourselves. It could have been something of a message like, I'm a good person, I'm a godly person, all of these kinds of things. So being able to fulfill that, if we now renege on our boundaries, there's a self-fulfilling aspect that we need to now talk about, saying that our boundaries do not negate our godliness.
that's right.
Right.
Oh my
So,
goodness,
so
yes.
that unraveling of the knot can be several things that we would explore. Of course, how an individual would also, or a person would react, and what their reactions would be, and that's coming from their sense of, being uncomfortable. But where's the discomfort coming from you as well, in
Yeah.
terms of being willing to renege on your boundaries?
Yeah, I think you're sharing this now, and I'm thinking to myself, sometimes, especially when you as an individual have invested the time, the effort into that introspection, when you've done the work, because honestly, my work with my therapist was not comfortable. It was
Mm,
rather uncomfortable for me,
mm,
but taking the time and investing the time into this awareness of self, this understanding of who you are as an individual, that's one thing. When you've established your boundaries, sometimes you may never understand what the other person's going through
that's
or
right.
what the other person is thinking, where their discomfort is coming from. Do we just go on with our boundaries regardless?
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
I really tell people what I think is very important is that you setting and maintaining boundaries um doesn't make you aggressive. It doesn't, and the loosening of your boundary. Passivity is not a badge of honor.
Oh, please, no.
It's not that's not it. I will always tell people that I'm working with, and in particular women, assertiveness is key.
Yes.
Right. Assertiveness is the key to liberate ourselves because
Mm-hmm.
it's in the ability to communicate our needs. Yes, understanding that again, we're not, always use the term throwing people under the bus,
Mm-hmm.
but if it means that this relationship no longer serves its purpose, then we have to then say, okay, you know what? I let you go. Because you may have your own journey to deal with, but this is where I am at this time. You can actually be a part of that journey, or you can move forward. So I'm always editing, sort of
Right.
my spaces, understanding who's in my spaces, who continues to be along my side, whom are the people that I need to edit because they're no longer in a space where we have a mutual and respectful reciprocal relationship.
Right.
All of those things come into play.
Yeah, that's deep, and I can well imagine that that consistent edit allows for all our relationships and interactions to be mutually beneficial,
That's
so
right.
that everyone within that relationship is getting something, is gaining something, is growing, is benefiting, and we
Absolutely.
get to do this together. Which kind of brings me to the idea of vulnerability. I
Mm,
was I was playing with the I was playing with a post that I was going to put up on my personal profile, and I still haven't figured out how to write it properly, so it hasn't gone up.
mhm.
But I'm the idea of vulnerability in my mind, I can only be vulnerable with someone who either allows me to be fully vulnerable and is capable of reciprocating the vulnerability. I
You've got it.
feel
You've
I
got it.
feel best in that. But for the longest time, Dr. Natasha, I thought of vulnerability as a high risk adventure. Let me tell you.
Yes, yes. No,
You don't do
I
that.
hear you. I hear you. Well, I think again, we were never taught that vulnerability is actually a strength. And I know people may have heard that before, but vulnerability has always been connected to weakness, and weakness means you were always in a one down position. And if
Yeah,
we've been conditioned and bred to always be strong, then vulnerability goes off the table, but it's
right.
always to our detriment. What's interesting is what you said about sort of the nature of vulnerability and being able to share that vulnerability with people who are deserving of it.
Yes.
That to me is the
Yes.
most important thing because again, and that's where we always talk about reciprocity in relationship. I can communicate my vulnerability, but whom am I giving that to? Because
Yes.
if I'm not in a psychologically safe space, or that person has not provided that emotional safety, then my vulnerability can be jeopardized and it could be weaponized against me.
That's it. It's the weaponization of vulnerability that really has so, and again, these thoughts were conditioned into us, especially as Black humans,
Yes.
because our vulnerability has been weaponized,
Yes.
and the system is set up to
Mhm.
weaponize our vulnerability. So,
Mhm.
how do we determine who is
Mhm.
deserving of our vulnerability?
Yeah. Well, I think what we do is we always tend to analyze our relationships. And I find a lot of times what we do is we give, especially if we're cultivating new relationships and those kinds of things, we give a little bit of ourselves almost as a test
Yes.
and see how that individual cultivates that information, holds that information, reciprocates it back, maybe provides feedback. So if you notice that you are communicating a little bit of vulnerability, maybe something that a thought that you had about another individual or something of that nature, where you didn't necessarily want to disclose it to everybody, but then you're automatically met with judgment, like how in the world could you think that way? That person, the minute that you start getting that kind of negative feedback and judgment, that vulnerable gate
Yeah.
closes with that individual because the piece that I gave you, you did not take care of it.
Right.
You did not cultivate it. So because of that, I now know that I cannot be vulnerable with you because you can't hold that space for me. So a lot of times it's in the bits and pieces of testing where you find that this person has held space for me and has been able to, sort of take care of that space unapologetically, but also without judgment. So I've
Right.
had people in my lives anywhere 20, 30 years, those kinds of things where as things evolved and as life has changed, I knew that some information I don't feel comfortable sharing with them. I still have them in my circle, but I
Yeah.
think what you now do is if you are at the core of your circle, you now try to figure out whom is in the certain rings and who is closest to you. And that
Right.
can change over time.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Like,
Right.
for example, in my circle, my sister is my best friend, one of my best friends. And part of it is because she's never judged, when I was in a vulnerable space, if I needed a shoulder, if any of those things, she's never been judgmental or made me feel that anything less than. My partner, he's the same way. Never been judgmental. He's been an ear to listen to me
Mhm.
and providing me the space to laugh, to cry, to joke, for me to express my humanness.
Right.
Where there's others where, over time I noticed that, either they were unable to hold that space for me, or B, when I did give them a little something, I was met with either judgment and or they didn't hold space for me. It was more about themselves. So
Yes.
for whatever reason they couldn't hold it, they move a little further away from my sanctuary.
Right, absolutely. That inner circle. And I
Mhm.
guess within that inner circle, when you can be vulnerable, you can also say, I need help.
That's
Somebody
it.
help me. This isn't working,
Right.
or I can't figure this out. That asking for help, one, it's a-okay, and
Right.
two, it's asking of the right people.
And on top of that, I think people need to understand that vulnerability is human. That is
Yeah,
our humanness. To be strong all the time is actually not humanly possible. We go in the scientific aspects of the sympathetic versus the parasympathetic nervous system and being at a homeostatic state. I won't go into all of the details, but in the midst of all of that is understanding in being in that homeostatic state. That also involves not being strong all the time and saying, hey, I do need help. So vulnerability is such an important piece in order to say, you know what, I'm living my human self, which is
you're
just
right.
fine.
Yeah, and I think in a society right now that is so we kind of live at extremes. It's either you're canceled or you're the rage, and what have you. We don't leave a lot of space for us to say, "Oops, I messed up. It was not my intention.
Mhm.
I really was doing my best, and this
Right.
happened. Can I be forgiven?
That's right.
Can
That's right.
you help me maybe do better?"
That's it.
I think it really is high risk for
Hmm.
us to be vulnerable in just to the whole world, because there doesn't seem to be room for that. But
Right.
for us to practice radical self-care, it is essential.
Absolutely. To me, there's a difference between excellence and perfection.
Mm,
So what I usually will tell my clients to think about is that there's no such thing as perfection because
right,
we're already created as human beings, which means we're already, we already have issues and flaws.
correct.
But we can always strive for a place of excellence. Excellence embodies vulnerability. So being able
Mhm.
to do those things and to understand the concepts of those things actually allows you to live a more fruitful life because you can tap into your humanness, you can make mistakes, you can learn from those mistakes and ask for help, be unapologetic about it, and still remain in a space of, I'm being the best person that I was created to be.
Yes, that is so true. I say to my girls, if I was brought up in an environment where failure was okay, I think I would have been further along because I would have tried things, I would have experimented and what have you. And
Yes.
that is probably the same for many. Dr. Natasha, I want to ask you so many more questions. I think that we have barely touched the tip, but I appreciate your teaching on radical self-care. It is not something that we have to earn. It is our right to go after it, to set those boundaries. I like to say, set your boundaries in Sharpie, not chalk.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Yes, absolutely.
Yes, absolutely. It's been wonderful having you here. Please tell us where we can find you. I mean, you're doing all the things. Where can we find you on the interwebs? Where can we get your books even?
Absolutely. So the best way to get me is through my website, which is www.drnatashawilliams.com. You can see all of my books there. You can actually book me as a speaker there as well. But I'm also on social media. So I'm on LinkedIn and I'm on Facebook and on Instagram. So you can really look at all of those handles. Just type in Dr. Natasha Williams. You will find me there. Follow me, like my content. And that's the best way. Those are the best ways to get to me.
Yeah, and it's great content. And I know this conversation was kind of light, but these are deep issues that can really move the needle in our entire life experience. So, Dr. Natasha, I need to have you back. I'm just saying it plainly, and I'm sure our listeners, our viewers are thinking the exact same thing. So, any final words, any final tips, anything that you want to kind of leave with our audience as we wrap up this episode?
Mhm. Well, what I will leave with you is, I mean, I know we had the quote at the beginning, but what I will say is that radical self-care is our birthright.
Yes.
I'm going to leave it there because I think if we don't understand that, then again, we go from that place of thinking we need to earn it. No, we are born into that greatness. So it is so important that radical self-care is our birthright.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm looking forward to our next conversation.
I
And
will be back. I will put that
yeah,
out there. I will be back.
fantastic, because there's so much more to share to all our viewers, our listeners. Thanks for joining us for this episode, and look forward to continuing our conversation with Dr. Natasha very soon. Take care, everyone. Thank you for joining me today on Catalyst Conversations. I hope this episode sparked something powerful to help on your journey to building wealth confidently and unapologetically. If you loved today's conversation, be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if something resonated with you, I'd love to hear about it. Let's keep the conversation going. Until next time, keep moving toward your goals, stay empowered, and continue sparking change on your wealth journey. This is Hadriana, and you've been listening to Catalyst Conversations.